Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Development Control meeting. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear and side of this room. That's wrong. The fire exit is located where you came in, and if you leave by the main doors, and we will meet in the War Memorial Park. Please note, this meeting is being webcast live on the internet. The webcast will also be published on YouTube after the meeting. Please can all members of the public and committee members turn their mobile phones to off or to silent. Thank you. For the benefit of the members of the public watching or participating in this meeting, I would like to explain who everyone is. My name is Councillor Nick Robinson, and I am chairman of this committee. To my left and right are the councillors who will be making decisions on the applications on this evening's agenda. To my immediate left and right are officers who will be presenting the applications, providing advice to the committee. The Development Control Committee is a regulatory committee, not a political meeting. The committee will be considering the published papers, examining the evidence brought before us tonight, and will make decisions based on planning reasons. We are guided by national and local planning policy and guidance. At the appropriate time, I will invite speakers to contribute to the meeting in the order set out in the update paper. May I ask all speakers, including visiting members, to speak clearly and keep to the points made on the application on material reasons only. No further dialogue between members of the committee and speakers will be permitted once questioning has finished. All speakers will be reminded of their permitted speaking time and will be advised when they have 1 minute remaining. May I ask all committee members to avoid repetition and keep any comments on each planning item to a maximum of 4 minutes. This evening, I think there are 7 items on the agenda, and I hope we'll be finished by 9 o'clock. I understand that planning can be emotive and ask that everyone remains polite and professional throughout this meeting. Thank you. Right, apologies for absence and substitutions. I have been given none, and I see no hands up, so we will take that as correct. Declarations of interest. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Item 1, in view of my comments in the consultation, I will leave the room and not take part in the debate.
Thank you for that, Councillor Tomlin. I see no other hands. So, urgent matters. I have none. Greg? Nope. No urgent matters. Good. Minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of October and the 27th of October. I move that the minutes of the meeting on the 6th of October are signed. Is there a seconder? Councillor Harvey, thank you. I will sign those after the meeting. And the 8th of December, hang on, am I getting this right? Yeah, the October, I'm getting this completely wrong. The minutes of the 27th of October will be approved at the next Development Control meeting. Thank you. I need to read what's written in front of me. Applications for planning. Catherine or Gemma?
Thank you, Chair. Item 1 seeks planning permission for the change of use of amenity land at the rear of 22, 24 and 26 Taylor Drive to residential, including the planting of a new hedge and the erection of a 2-metre high fence. That the proposed development would result in additional garden space for number 26 Taylor Drive. In terms of update, the update paper just summarises the member site visit that was carried out last Friday. There is no other update, and the application is recommended for approval.
Could we have the first speaker, Mr. Hunt, to the table, please? Mr Hunt, you have 4 minutes, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute left. Thank you.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. I'd like to thank the councillors for their time this evening. I see you have another busy schedule ahead of you, so I'll try and keep it under 4 minutes. I'd also like to thank the planning officers for their detailed work and the detailed report that resulted from that. The application in front of you today is associated with the private sale of a piece of land. It concerns the newly formed boundary and the change of use, reflecting how the land will be used in the future. The area in question, which is just over 100 square metres, is currently laid to grass and has been that way since the business park was created over 30 years ago. The owner of the park has identified it as surplus to his needs, and it is in process of being sold to myself. The change of use is therefore from a private landscaped area associated with a business area to a private landscaped area associated with a house, that is to say, a garden. Regarding the boundary, there is supposed to be a fence with a hedge, which is consistent with the other boundaries surrounding it. Access from my property will be created by the removal of hedging from the back of my garden into this new area. Connected with the additional hedging, there will actually be a net gain in hedging overall. I note the objections raised by councillors and one individual. I also note the parish council raised no objections. I thank the councillors for their attention to detail in planning matters, and whilst each case is considered individually on its merits, my curiosity was piqued, and I looked back and found 17 previous change of use applications in Bramley since 1997, of which 16 relate to the transfer of public land into private ownership, and one was unclear to me. Of the 17 previous, 9 were granted and 8 were refused, including the refusal and enforcement which the councillor had in mind when he made his comments. This suggests to me there is no standard view, and indeed each case is considered on its merits. Given the number of historic applications, and given that this case is a private land to private land transfer, I do not believe this case adds any confusion or promotion of the change of use situation in planning terms. There have indeed been many land grab attempts historically in the village, but land sales are certainly nothing novel. I know the council even has a policy and process associated with the sale of public land to private individuals. Looking at this case, the planning officer has produced a very thorough report and detailing the compliance with policies of the Borough Council CN9, EM1, EM4, EM5 and EM10, and policies D1 and RE3 of the Bramley Neighbourhood Plan. I don't propose to go over these points in detail. They're in the report, which I'm sure you've all read. In conclusion, I believe this is a fairly straightforward application associated with the private land sale, and the report demonstrates that it complies with council policies, and I ask for the councillors' approvals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. If you could turn your microphone off, thank you. Councillors, questions for Mr. Hunt? No? Okay. Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Mr. Hunt. Just very quickly, you're proposing to actually screen this new area by a 2 metre high fence. Could you just confirm that that 2 metre high fence will be all the way round, okay, with the exception of effectively the area where you're going to access it?
Thank you, councillor. The fence will be, as you look at the plans, on the unit side. It will be on the left side, and the upper side and the right side already have fencing and hedging. So they are effectively a hedge with a fence back behind it, a domestic style fence. So yes, the fence will effectively run around the whole property.
Thank you, Chair.
No more questions? No. Thank you, Mr. Hunt. If you could just wipe the microphone down and the sort of edge of the table and your chair arms, I'm sure the next speaker will appreciate it. Questions to officers? Councillor Godison.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask the officers, assuming the land sale goes ahead, but if the application were unsuccessful and wasn't approved, would he still be able to put the hedge up as along the edge of that strip as he's intending to do?
Thank Thank you. Yes, the erection of, or the planting of a hedge wouldn't require planning permission, and it's more than likely that the erection of a fence would be permitted development.
Any more questions? No. In that case, debate. If I could start it off, as I made some comments, there has, as the applicant said, been a history in Bramley of land grabbing, and that has largely been transfer of public amenity land to private land, and including garden curtilage, which is why I asked for this to come to committee. I've since found out that this is not that the same. It's not public amenity land, it is private amenity land. So any comments that I've made before, I withdraw. So if that's clear for everybody. Anybody, anything else for debate? We are on debate. Thank you. Councillor Godison.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, if he were permitted to put the fence up anyway, then that rather sort of negates what I'm about to say. But what I was about to say is, page 66, Principle of Development Policy EM1 states that development will be permitted only where it can be demonstrated that the proposal is sympathetic to the character and visual quality of the area concerned. I wouldn't have thought that that the application actually fulfills that requirement. I would not have thought it does demonstrate that it's sympathetic. But of course, if he's going to put the fence up, edge up anyway, then that objection rather goes out of the window. Thank you.
Anyone else for debate? In which case, I will move it from the chair. Is there a seconder? Councillor Frost. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? I think that's everyone except... Sorry? And those against? And I take it that's an abstention from Councillor Godison. Yeah. Thank you. Gemma.
Sorry, can you just confirm the vote numbers for me, please?
I think we made it 10-4 on one abstention, didn't we? 9 on 1.
Thank you, Chair. The application is approved subject to the conditions as set out within the main agenda. Thank you.
Right. Item number 2, Springfield, Viables Lane, Basingstoke. If we could have Mrs. England to the Speaker's chair to start with. And if you could just wait there whilst the officer... please sit down. Yeah. If you could wait there whilst the officer introduces the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. As you say, item 2 is for land at Springfield, Viables Lane in Basingstoke. The proposal is for the removal of an existing detached property which sits fairly central within the plot, and its replacement with 6 new dwellings. So these include 2 number 3-bed units and 4 number 4-bed units. And because the plot has a dual frontage, then the properties will be arranged to front both Betherley Close to the south and Viables Lane to the north. If I draw members' attention to the update paper, there's a very slight amendment to the description, just making sure that is correct, and also a summary of the viewing panel that occurred last Friday. Also, I'd like to do one very small verbal update in relation to condition 4 on page 98 of your agenda. And just to add some extra words to the very last sentence of condition 4, which is actually at the top of page 99. And this is where it says the development shall be carried out in accordance with the approved biodiversity management plan. I'd like to add in the words to be carried out in accordance and retained in perpetuity in accordance with the biodiversity management plan. So it is having that in perpetuity. The application is recommended for approval as per the conditions and informatives set out within your report. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Mrs. England, you have 4 minutes. I will warn you when you have 1 minute left, and it's a button on the microphone.
Thank you, good evening. Firstly, I would like to thank both the developers and planning for their consideration of all comments made by residents in Beverley Close and for the support of our local councillor in this matter. Notwithstanding, this planning application is still an overdevelopment of the Beverley Close boundary based on Beverley Close density and frontage, which appropriately lends itself to 2 larger 4/5 bedroomed houses that would mirror the Beverley Close houses opposite, namely number 2 and 3. This would help to alleviate the increased traffic and parking issues that will inevitably result under the current plans, which already causes an issue for houses number 2 and 3 Beverley Close when they reverse from their drives if any vehicles are parked legally or illegally on the road opposite their properties. Additional thought must be given to where the drop curbs are positioned to better protect the free flow of traffic in the street without the possibility of damaging parked vehicles due to the narrow nature of the close. If 2 properties is not an option, then under the current plan, plot A2 should have a full drop curb across its full frontage, so no cars can park on the road outside that property, and the space between plots A1 and A2 should not allow for any parked vehicles. An alternative, and perhaps a more sensible one, which would also address the concerns raised by number 6 Beverley Close regards visual amenity and light, would be to reverse the siting of plots A1 and A2 and then have full dropped curbs across both plots A1 and A2 so that again no parking would be possible. In the interests of maintaining good relations, we politely request that both the developers and the planning process again give their comments and proposals due consideration. Overdevelopment and free flow of traffic in a currently quiet residential street is a major concern of residents, which we should believe should still be a major consideration before planning approval is granted. Many thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you. If you could turn the microphone off, and just wait there whilst there may be some questions. Questions for the speaker? No? No questions? Okay, they'll let you off lightly. Thank you very much. And I see you've already wiped down, much appreciated. Mr. M. Taylor. You two will have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute left. Button on the microphone to speak.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors. On behalf of the applicant and myself as the agent, we're very pleased to present this application to you this evening, and I'm obviously speaking in support of the officer's recommendation to approve planning permission. As councillors will be aware, this is a brownfield site in a highly sustainable location in Basingstoke, close to Viable's industrial estate. The proposal seeks consent for 6 well-appointed and sympathetic family houses. The sustainable location maximises the potential for future residents to be able to walk or cycle to fulfil their day-to-day needs, with employment opportunities basically on the doorstep, and obviously their weekly shopping and leisure needs fulfilled by Basingstoke Town Centre itself. From the outset, a key approach for this brownfield redevelopment has always been to make the most effective use of the land, balanced against the character of the area and creating a neighbourly development. You will be aware from the information submitted that we actively engaged in consultation with residents prior to the submission of the application. Obviously, we weren't obligated to do so, but we are very considerate in our approach. And we've considered their views sort of from the outset as a result. Viability has always been a key consideration for us, and you would have seen that the original proposal was indeed for 7 houses. However, the 7-unit scheme, as you would have seen, received a significant level of objection from local residents on Beverley Close particularly, and with the main concern at that time was that they simply didn't want semi-detached houses on the close. So accordingly, in consultation with your planning officer, we revised the proposal down to only 6 houses, and we now only propose detached houses on Beverley Close as requested. I'm pleased to report that, as you would have seen, following that revision, we only actually received further comments from only 2 households. The vast majority of the community, therefore, all of the people who objected previously, raised no objections to those revised plans. And even those comments that were received were largely positive, notwithstanding some of the comments from Mrs. England just now. Obviously, Mrs. England and Mr. England both provided a consultation response, and particularly, I would say Mr. England's response was that he now has no objection with the proposal, save for he was looking for plot A2 to be effectively flipped. I've opened a dialogue throughout with Mr. and Mrs. England, and I will continue to work with them, subject to this achieving permission and going forward with the development, because we are very considerate developers. And the concern regarding the plot at A2, whilst I understand that they would prefer it's flipped, so the driveway isn't opposite theirs, you would have seen that it isn't a substantive highways objection, and Hampshire County Council have confirmed no objection in this regard, as has been clarified by your planning officer. It simply doesn't raise a highway safety issue. At a time when the council cannot demonstrate 5-year housing land supplies, you'll be aware, and therefore housing is being allowed in the countryside where policies would not normally permit it. This application seeks the redevelopment of a brownfield site within the settlement limits where planning policy specifically directs new housing.
You have 1 minute left.
Thank you. This development therefore makes a small but important housing contribution in the right location, contributing towards supply and hopefully easing the pressure on greenfield sites in the countryside. We consider that this really is a highly sustainable proposal and very sympathetic, certainly not anywhere near overdevelopment, and it certainly makes much better use of a previously developed site to provide 6 high-quality family houses in a policy-compliant location. The proposal has very limited objection now, subject to the revised plans that have been accepted, and which I believe are testament to the fact that it really does now correspond with the character and is an extremely neighbourly proposal. I very politely ask that you support your officer's recommendation and grant planning permission, subject, of course, to appropriate conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Taylor? Councillor Hussey.
Have you considered extending the width of the drop curbs to the frontage of the properties facing Beverley Close?
Sorry, it's on, isn't it? Sorry. Yeah, first and foremost, obviously we're providing policy-compliant parking on site, so there's absolutely no reason for us to remotely want people parking on the street. Of course we don't. You know, it's new houses. The parking is expected to be off-road. In terms of providing drop curbs all the way along the highway, I've not got any particular concern with that. I would, of course, revert to Hampshire County Council to make sure they have no concerns from a highway safety point of view if it was a drop curb all the way along. Obviously, there's a reason for curbs to separate the highway, the road from the pavement. But yeah, absolutely, we aren't relying upon on-street parking. We don't want to encourage on-street parking, and importantly, we're providing requisite parking on site. So we would be open to that if councillors found it was necessary.
Councillor Tomlin, followed by Councillor Godison.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Just a question. I thought I heard you say that all properties were now detached. Only, could you just explain the ones on viables, which my plans, show as semi?
Yes, apologies for any confusion. No, what I was referring to is that the objections at the time were from residents who didn't want there to be any detached units on Beverley Close. So we have revised the proposal so that on Beverley Close there was only detached units. So absolutely there is a semi-detached unit, but that is on viables, not Beverley Close.
Councillor Godison.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very minor point. The proposal, as described on page 74, states the erection of 2 4-bedroom and 3 3-bedroom, but looking at the proposal on page 76, it seemed that the right reference should be 4 4-bedrooms and 2 3-bedrooms. One of those is presumably incorrect.
Any more questions for the Speaker? Councillor Ganesh.
Thank you, Chair. My question is going back to the drop curb. Do you have the sort of a width between two drop curbs on Beverly Close, or is that something that planning officer might be able to? The distance between the drop
From one side of the road
A
to
to B, B to C. Yes.
Oh, sorry, between the drop curbs.
Yeah.
Use the microphone, please.
I don't have that information to hand, no. But they're 4 detached units, so there's a reasonable separation between each, but no more than you would normally expect in a typical sort of residential street. But yeah, it's. I mean, you can see from the site plan that separations between the drop curbs are not significant, and obviously some of the units have driveways close together, and then there are some gaps in between where the front gardens are. I must admit, I don't have the exact figure offhand. I'd have to measure it off the drawing, but yeah, there are some wider gaps between certain driveways and smaller gaps, obviously, where the driveways meet.
May I ask a supplementary, if it's okay? The reason I'm asking is just to find out if that space between those drop curbs would be sufficient to park a vehicle.
I see.
So is that something that you think possible, or it's not a space that a vehicle can't be parked?
Yeah, thank you. I think you'll see on the site plan, but I do believe that there would be scope, possibly to fit a small car on one particular point. Other than that, I would say generally speaking, it is a bit short for a car to be parked there without sort of certainly affecting sort of the usability of that driveway. So I think there would be a natural. There wouldn't be any natural encouragement to park there. You wouldn't routinely drive down there once those drop curbs are there and think that's a parking space. It's not particularly wide.
Thank you, Chair.
Any more questions for the speaker? No? Thank you very much. If you could have a quick wipe down as you leave, and if we could have Councillor Mackay. Good evening. You will have 4 minutes. I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll be extremely brief. I wanted to come along in person tonight because I'd originally objected to this application on the initial plans, but I've come to the view that this application should be supported, so I wanted to come and do that in person. I'd like to thank the residents, particularly Beverly Close, who gave me a lot of their time to help understand their concerns around the issue. But I think we should acknowledge the work of the officers and the developer in making some significant changes to the application compared to the original. I'll give examples of how it goes a long way towards addressing some of the concerns. At least the density has improved. I think the layout has been improved as well. It's more in keeping with the locality, and the design of the individual houses is far better and a better match for the area. The original application really looked like something plucked out of somewhere else and popped into Beverly Close, whereas I think we've got a much better match now. I think all of that adds up to a development that's appropriate for this site, and it will make a positive contribution, albeit quite small, a positive contribution to the housing needs of this borough, and I hope the committee is minded to approve the application. Thank you.
Questions for the councillor? No? Thank you very much. And you're already wiping down. Questions to officers? No questions to officers? In that case, debate. Councillor Hussey.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Mackay is right in saying that officers and the applicant have gone a long way to improve the proposal in front of us this evening from the original submission, which did lead to a cramped looking style on Beverly Close. And the frontage is now in Beverley Close are much more in keeping with, although they're smaller than the existing houses in Beverley, much more in keeping. But the concerns I've got is should this application be approved this evening, it is the construction phase, and in the conditions it does talk about there being a construction plan, which we don't see. It's referred to as a construction method statement. And what I would like to request, should the application be approved, is that before officers agree to that statement from the developer, that the ward councillor, in particular Councillor Mackay, because he has led on this, although I'm a ward councillor, I've kept apart from the residents so I could speak this evening, that he be consulted to make certain that during construction there's the minimum inconvenience to residents, and give him the opportunity to make a contribution. But that statement only relates to what happens on site and onto the highway proper, and we can't constrict what happens on the highway. But I have a concern that at the end of Beverley Close there are 2 care homes. Now, I don't know how often an ambulance goes to those care homes, only my own personal observation, and it is reasonably frequent. So I wouldn't want to see anything happen in Beverley Close which would impede the progress of an ambulance. So I would hope that the applicant stroke the developer is listening to me this evening, so that the site manager would try to manage that situation to prevent excessive parking on Beverley Close, and therefore causing some restriction, not an obstruction, but restriction, which would impede in some way the ambulance. But I would like, obviously, just to take note that we would like to see the construction method statement before it is formally agreed, and therefore give both the applicant and the officers time, perhaps, to amend it in the light of observations from the councillor.
Catherine, do you want to comment on that?
So the construction management statement that's being referred to is on page 99 of your agenda if members wish to have a look at it, which does include criteria to secure parking and turning of vehicles of on-site operatives and visitors off the carriageway. Now again, we will be looking for a statement to come forward to us, which we would review in conjunction with our highway colleagues. But again, we could put a note on the file to seek that further consultation with the ward members, should that suffice and be of assistance to you. Of course, at the end of the day, it is a public highway, so of course vehicles could park there regardless, but again, we would have that statement in place to try and manage that situation for the construction period.
Thank you, Catherine. Councillor Harvey.
Just supporting Councillor Hussey's comments, on that particular condition, am I mistaken, or are there no hours of construction proposed, and would that be part of the construction statement? And surely in a residential area that would be appropriate, I think.
So I would just turn your attention to page 102 and conditions 14 and 15, which include hours for deliveries of construction materials and the working of the construction process itself.
Thank you. Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened very carefully here, and I think when I was reading or rereading through the paper at the weekend, I thought the conditions were actually quite good in the fact that I think everything had been covered. However, I am in agreement that I think that the ward councillor should be contacted for any sort of input, but and if that's acceptable to the applicant, then I will be minded to actually make a motion to approve the planning permission.
Councillor Frost, could you clarify, is that a motion to approve, or are you minded to do it at some point?
I actually thought I was quite clear, Chair, in the fact that I'm minded to make it a motion. Now.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Ganesh, thank you. Anybody else for debate? No. Been moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, full set. Thank you. That has been approved. Catherine? Sorry, Councillor Harvey.
Forgive me, Catherine, just on condition 15, it says on the final sentence, Saturdays nor on Sundays. Was that what you meant, nor or not? Just a simple typo, but it's important just to clarify it.
I think you'll find the word nor is actually our standard wording that you will find common throughout the other conditions. That's fine.
If you could confirm the recommendation, please, Catherine.
Thank you, Chairman. That application has been resolved for approval, subject to the conditions and informatives listed within the agenda. Thank you. And the verbal change to condition 4.
Item 3, 3 and 4 Wheatley's Close, Steventon. And if we could have Peter Lees to the Speaker's chair. Sorry? Okay, thank you. In that case, Mr. Stewart. And if you could just wait there whilst Gemma introduces it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Item 3 seeks planning permission for the conversion of 2 semi-detached dwellings to a single dwelling, together with operational development including the replacement of a conservatory with a single-storey rear extension, addition of 6 glass bricks to the front elevation at first floor, replacement of front doors and driveway works at 3 and 4 Wheatley's Close in Steventon. The application site is located within the Steventon conservation area. If I could just draw members' attention to the update paper, it was noted that the proposed elevations were omitted from the main agenda by mistake, so they've just been reproduced for your information there. The application has been called in to Development Control Committee tonight by Councillor Taylor for the reasons outlined on page 113 of the main agenda. The application is recommended for refusal due to the loss of residential unit contrary to local plan policy SS1 and the national planning policy framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Gemma. Mr. Stewart, you have 4 minutes. I will warn you when you have 1 minute left. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. The property, 3 and 4 Wheatley's Close, is regarded as the family home and has been a single household and dwelling since March 2011, a little over 10 years. Our plans are based on the mistakes, problems and lessons we learnt in providing housing and care for my late father-in-law who had dementia. As we get older, we too want to remain in the community, but cannot ask our son to pay the price we did. Ultimately, my career, my business and my health. Problems with the original properties include each had a single reception room, which when used as a downstairs bedroom rendered the rest of the property impractical. The reception room is so narrow that while caring for my father-in-law, carers could not work from both sides of a single bed. A cramped understairs toilet is the only downstairs sanitation. The small upstairs bedrooms are further reduced by having to extend the bathroom, which was very small and had no toilet. I propose to retain the house as a family home for the next generation, while simultaneously catering for our later life through the provision of a downstairs bedroom and bathroom, so allowing us all to remain in the house and in the village. Refusal of this application will not help the housing stock, as number 4 would continue as an impractical annex, what was the kitchen becoming a bathroom, and the single reception room a bedroom, and with number 3 remaining a 2-bedroom property. It will mean missing out on a practical home for the extended family. We will be left with a home unsuitable for the needs of older people and the carer having to go outside at all times of day and night and in all weathers. We know from experience it will mean stress, indignity, discomfort, risk of injury, and my wife and I effectively in separate properties. The objection takes a one-sided view of the Basingstoke and Dean local plan, which also contains elements supportive of our application. For example, SS1B is highly significant, namely supporting regeneration in line with policy SS2, which reads, improvement of existing property to the benefit of the local community through the refurbishment of existing properties. This is exactly what we're proposing. Steventon has an ageing population. It also struggles to keep families through a lack of practical family homes. The objection raised relates to SS1C, existing developments that involve a net loss of housing, unless it can be demonstrated that the benefits outweigh the harm. The claimed loss is a single residence, in reality an annex. Therefore, there is no real loss of housing. However, there is a benefit in providing a family-orientated house. There's a benefit in providing a house that can also support aged relatives. There's a benefit in keeping the next generation in the community. There's a benefit in allowing independent living. There's a benefit in provision of care in the community. There are health benefits from reduced stress, fatigue, and more. There's a benefit to the local community by providing the type of house needed in Steventon. There are benefits to the wider borough in reducing the onus for care and housing requirements of the elderly. In conclusion, there is no real loss of residential property. The two theoretical three-bedroom properties
40 seconds.
Don't and won't exist. The possibility of building an annex in the garden is not feasible due to an electric pole and a growing oak tree. Benefits as shown are numerous for the wider community as well as ourselves. Finally, can I quote from paragraph 5.32 of your local plan? A key principle in meeting the housing needs of older people will be to maximise their ability to live independently for as long as they are able and wish to do so. It will also be vital that they feel empowered to making choices regarding their accommodation and housing related services. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you turn your microphone off, thank you. Questions for the speaker? No? No questions? Thank you very much. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Taylor, you have 4 minutes. I will warn you when you have 1 minute to go.
Thank you, Chair. Here I am again. First of all, apologies from the Chair of Steventon Parish Council. He had another meeting he had to go to, but he did want to express their full support of this application and to say that the Stewart family have been integral members of the village for many years, engaged in a multitude of activities, helping everyone in the community. It will be a great loss to the village should they have to move away to accommodate the family. This is me. As you've heard and as you can see, there's only one reason for the recommendation for refusal of this proposal, that it is contrary to policy SS1C of the local plan, whereby there are no benefits demonstrated that would outweigh the harm generated. That harm, as you've heard, is that it officially reduces our housing stock by one dwelling. If you take a microscope to just our local plan policies, which I believe our officers have to do, so there's no criticism there, then yes, one small dwelling is officially lost. I say officially because, as you've heard, this place has operated as one family dwelling for many years. If, however, you throw away the microscope and look at the overall picture, how can we possibly say that there are no benefits that outweigh the harm? And you've heard what Mr. Stewart has had to say. It's hard to even discern the harm, but the benefits are surely immense. A family can be together so that the younger generation can look after mum and dad in their old age. We have a care crisis. This sort of scheme is exactly what's needed, and I know I've said this in committee before. I would support wholeheartedly anything that facilitates family being together to care for their own. And as two generations are joining together who might otherwise live separately, this proposal will ensure that there is one extra home on the market, counterbalancing the perceived loss of a dwelling. It will place for as long as possible no burden on our beleaguered care system. It will keep in their own village a family who have lived there for many years, a family that doesn't want to move anywhere else. And I would just like to say too that this ward has had imposed on it 200 more homes than allocated in the local plan. I can't imagine that anyone would begrudge this perceived reduction of one dwelling. It quite honestly makes no difference at all to anything. Please could I ask the committee to take a broad view approach to this and utilise what we used to call in this committee the common sense policy. It would be a truly awful tick box exercise if this family is denied such a simple, sensible and deserving request. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, any questions for the councillor? No? Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor. Questions to officers? Councillor Leeks.
On the update, it says proposed elevation of additional of glass bricks. What are glass bricks, please?
I think they are literally bricks that are made out of glass.
That's cool. No, green.
I see no other hands, but I've got a question. If this has been used as one dwelling for 10 years, has it not got benefit of an existing use?
No applications been made on that basis. So as far as the planning history is concerned, there's no lawful use as a single dwelling.
Thank you. Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just struggling how to phrase this. Yes, there is potentially, officially, the loss of one residential unit here, but in reality, if they've been using it for the past 10 years, I'm struggling to understand why they can't actually we can't actually approve this and give these people the benefit of the house that they want. There is also more houses that are being proposed for Steventon, such as the retirement village. Okay, I appreciate that it may not be a material planning issue, but there are more houses that are coming on stream. Okay, I'm struggling after 10 years of living in these two houses why we can't make an exception this once.
Thank you. Any more for debate? Councillor Harvey, followed by...
Thank you, Chair. Question comes down to planning balance, and it comes down to whether or not I think we as members consider there is harm being done here. I'm conscious there's only, as has already been said, one reason for rejection, and that reason is related to housing land supply. Admittedly, we don't have a 5-year housing land supply, so that's already a shot in the foot. But the context here is what harm is being done. I note the completions in our annual monitoring report are above target. I note that the loss of one dwelling set against the amount that's arriving is not a material consideration for us. So the question becomes one of SS1, and is that harmful? And in my view, actually, I'd reverse the reason for rejection into a reason for approval on the basis of saying I don't think the planning balance is that there are benefits that demonstrate that they would not outweigh harm. I think the benefits have demonstrated that they are okay in this particular example. It's a full application, I note that point in the report. So the choice has been made by the applicant to make a full application rather than a change of lawful use. So I get that point, but actually in my head that's a benefit, because if members are minded to approve it, that's a benefit to the applicant, that they can get on and do it in a way that is positive to their circumstances. So in my mind, the loss of one unit set against the planning benefit that would be gained out of this by the harm being done, yeah, I would support approval rather than rejection. And I'm minded to move approval on the basis of reversing the reason for rejection 1.
Councillor Hussey, you had your hand up first.
Well, I'm going to go against what other councillors have said, and I support the recommendation. I support it for one reason. Over the years I've been a councillor, which is over 25 years, I've sat here and listened to rural councillors bemoaning the lack of small houses so that their local children can grow up and stay in the village when they've reached maturity. They're being priced out of it by larger and larger homes. That's not my view, that is the view of rural councillors, meeting after meeting over the years. And in this particular example here, we're losing 2 small units. Not one, we're losing 2 small units. Starter homes, people on lower incomes, however you look at it, we're losing 2 and getting yet another large detached house. And I've also heard from rural councillors here that often the objections to the smaller units come from the people who have moved in the Johnny-come-latelys, who live in the much larger houses. So I don't know how you can keep switching your position based on non-planning reasons. I fully appreciate the reasons given by the applicant who wanted to stay in one unit. But when you look at the long term, going on another 10 or 20 years, we are short, according to the rural councils, we're short of small units in our villages. This is removing 2. I support the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Howard Sorrell, followed by Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Councillor Hussey for speaking on behalf of young people. I was minded to do the same thing. Houses are already becoming unaffordable, and the loss of these 2, whilst I can sympathise greatly with the family, I think we're in a position where we can't look at the houses over the next 10 years, we have to look at them over the next 50. And this family will eventually move on, regardless of what we do today. And it's once they move on, will there be one big house left, or will there be 2 smaller ones? And I agree with Councillor Hussey that we should go with the officer's recommendation for refusal. So.
Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a very interesting situation we have here. Looking at the houses, I wonder if they ever would be sold as individual houses, or whether people would actually buy them without doing a massive amount of work, because it does look like they're quite old and in need of attention. So I do sympathise with the houses in the ward, the need, but that seems to be addressed by more houses coming along in our local plan. So in this instance, I tend to move onto the side to actually second the motion that proposed by Councillor Harvey, and so I would second it for approval. Thank you.
Councillor Goderson.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I was merely going to offer to second the proposal to approve. So, as Councillor Tomlin has done that, that's not necessary. I mean, I would like to say that I fully sympathise with the comments made by Councillor Hussey. I mean, I understand what he's saying, but entirely. But I do feel very strongly that on balance this is an acceptable development, and I think the comments we've heard from Mr. Stewart and Councillor Taylor demonstrate to me that that there are benefits which do outweigh the harm which might be caused by the loss of one house. Thank you.
Greg.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could perhaps help members out with a couple of points that have been discussed. Firstly, just in terms of the motion that's been put forward, in terms of the benefits that have been mentioned, I just wondered if members could perhaps clarify my understanding that the benefits that have been mentioned are the personal circumstances of the applicant that we've heard. We've obviously got it in writing in the agenda paper. We've heard in a bit more detail from the speakers. So that was the first point. If members could confirm that that was the benefits referenced. In respect of the reference to smaller units, we have a policy CN3 of our borough local plan that's supported by the Housing SPD that seeks to secure a certain percentage of smaller units for new housing developments. This is where housing units are being created. This is obviously a proposal that's looking to result in the loss of a housing unit. So you've got before you the officer's recommendation for refusal in respect of policy SS1 because there's a loss of housing stock in terms of one unit. There's no reference there to the smaller units because that's not part of a consideration where we're losing units as opposed to gaining them. That was only 2 points for me. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. My feelings personally is tended to support Councillor Hussey and Councillor Howard Sorrell. A number of times I've sat here with looking at one-off housing applications. Oh, it's just one more house, but that contributes towards the housing stock, and we pass them on that basis. So I can't turn that justification round to vote for this to go through because it's it's the other half of the same equation. So anyway, it's been moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'll make that. Those against? 3. That has been approved. Yeah, if you'd like to bring some conditions in, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. So there's just a few conditions that officers would suggest. The first one in relation to the plans that have been submitted and just ensuring that the development's carried out in accordance with those plans. Secondly, just the standard time condition requiring that the development is commenced before the expiration of 3 years from the permission. And then lastly, just to secure that the materials used in the construction of the development are as those included on the approved plans and application forms.
Thank you. Item 4, 12 Manor Road, Sherborne St John. And if we could have Mrs Mayo to the Speaker's chair. And if you just wait there for a minute whilst the officer introduces it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So, as indicated, this application is for land at 12 Manor Road, Sherborne St John. The application proposes the demolition of the existing property which sits to the front of the site and its replacement with a 4-bedroomed property, together with a second dwelling of 3 bedrooms erected to the rear in a form of backland development. And members will note on page 150 of your agenda that there is a pattern of backland development within this particular area. If I draw members' attention to the update paper, and this contains a summary of the viewing panel that was carried out last week. The application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions and informatives listed within your agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Mrs Mayo, you have 4 minutes, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
The big one. Hi, I'm the parish clerk in Sherborne St John. No councillor was able to come, so I'm presenting the objections. The parish council wish to again register their objection to this application. While the rumble strips on the driveways appear to have been deleted in this amendment, there will still be constant vehicle noise. Size of houses will mean at least 10 vehicles going up and down next to bungalows 10A and B, continuously passing 10A's bedroom and living rooms, sited on that side of their bungalow throughout the day, evening and at night, will cause an unacceptable and intrusive noise and light level. There are precedents from previous infill second property applications which immediately border this site, limiting the height and nature of second residence to be true single-storey bungalows next door. The ground slopes down the hill with the result that the proposal for 12A will domineer, overlook and severely impact bungalows 10B and 10A. There is no reason to move the driveways from the south to the north side of the plot, other than to maximise the sun in their gardens, despite the detrimental effect this will have on 10A and 10B. 12A has no garage or space for one, so vehicles will be continuously parked facing the gardens of 10A and B, and their lights will be a further intrusion to the neighbouring homes' privacy and peace. The plans incorrectly list the hedge on the north side as part of 12's curtilage, thereby failing to make any provision for privacy of the neighbouring properties and gardens by erecting a hedge or fence in the plans. Manor Road rises quite steeply, and the difference in height on the boundaries between 10A and B and 12 is approximately 2 metres, and with large two-storey houses with heights of 6.1 metres and 5.75 metres respectively, the heights will be extremely oppressive and overpowering, especially as the lounge and bedrooms in 10A are that side of the development, so will overlook and breach their privacy as well as blocking light. A photo was supplied taken from the adjacent property which illustrates the totally unacceptable and oppressive nature of the newly erected 6-foot fence with the heights differential, as they have added 200 to 250 millimetres concrete gravel boards. With two-storey houses behind the fence, this height differential will be increased to totally unacceptable levels. With two separate properties, the entrance onto the road is now doubled, so it will present a traffic problem with accessing the road and pedestrians on the pavement trying to walk up the hill. The change of driveways from the south to the north side will also mean it is directly opposite a home on the other side of the road, again creating a traffic hazard. It is a concern that existing bungalows and infill development is regularly removing the availability of small dwellings in a village which needs them for those wishing to downsize, and this has been highlighted in the Sherburn St John Neighbourhood Plan. The application describes these as chalet bungalows. There are numerous chalet bungalows within the village and they bear no resemblance to them in style. These are large homes which can easily be enlarged further.
You have 1 minute
The
remaining.
proposed property is viewed as overdevelopment and is out of the character to the surrounding properties which are single-storey bungalows. It is noted that while previously in the planning documentation a street view of the current bungalow was included, which clearly shows the height differentials, they have not shown a view of the proposed new 4-bedroomed, which reaches the height of 5.75 metres, with 12A higher at 6.1 metres, as this would clearly demonstrate just how badly the development would overpower the neighbouring property and block their light. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for the speaker? No? Thank you very much. If we
Thank
could have a quick wipe down, that would be much appreciated.
No.
If we could have Mr. Munger, if we could have Mr. Munger, Mr. Farrelly, and Mr. Edwards, please. Or Mrs. Edwards, I'm not sure which it is. Okay. You have 4 minutes between you, and I will warn you when there's 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
Thank you. In 2006, a local property developer applied for planning permission to build a 2-storey property in the garden of number 10 Manor Road. This proposed development would become 10B Manor Road. The 2-storey application was denied, following objections by local property owners supported by the parish council. A single-storey detached bungalow with 3 bedrooms, 5 reception rooms, 2 bathrooms, kitchen and utility room was constructed. The same plot size and accommodation as proposed for 12A Manor Road. 10B Manor Road, my home, does not overshadow, overlook or intrude on the privacy of neighbours. The proposed development of 12A of a 2-storey dwelling on this elevated site would be overlooking adjacent properties and gardens, denying owners their privacy. Should this application be approved, I would ask for the reassurance that the slab level, the datum, be set at the existing mean garden levels between 10B and 16A Manor Road, and not the artificial level being created by the new raised rear fence and gravel boards, as this could add a further 500 to 700 millimetres to the ridge height.
The report by the department makes no justification for moving the entrance where it's currently placed to from its present position. I currently have a serious disability affecting mobility and with sleep patterns already disrupted by pain. At 79 years of age and with my wife of 83 years, we used our life savings to purchase a bungalow with an ensuite attached to the bedroom. It's on significantly lower land than number 12, which is planned to be a house towering above our bungalow. The current entrance will be moved away from the applicant's other house where it will cause them no apparent harm and site it next with the driveway next to our house. It's at a height comparative to our bedroom and lounge windows. The noise and headlight illumination at night will mean our having to abandon the master bedroom with its convenience to a small bedroom not having those facilities. This will have a major impact on our lives as this was bought to make life easier and more accessible. The entrance to the proposed development is currently sited on the south side where it does not cause traffic constriction, nor would the driveway placed there cause any problems to neighbours. The application to move it to our side of the development will cause the immense distress, and by placing the entrance next to ours and opposite two entrances to the other side of the road will undoubtedly cause restriction to traffic movement and be exacerbated by more vehicles in the planned extra houses. Ladies and gentlemen, we invested a hard-earned life saving to the purchase of 10A Manor Road, currently being made accessible for my condition before we move in. If the application is approved as planned, it will have a devastating impact on the anticipated convenience and peaceful lives we had looked forward to for so long. We
You
ask
have
the
1
committee
minute
to make
remaining.
the decision as it did for the similar application for 10B. Whilst realised that keeping the driveway on the other side will bring the houses nearer to ours, it's much more acceptable to look at a brick wall than face the noise of traffic going up and down beside our windows. Thank you.
I speak on behalf of the neighbours that are unable to speak due to the time restraint. I'll recap on what I've got to say very quickly due to only being 20 seconds left. There's 4 exits going onto one part of Manor Road, showing lights into 3 bedroom windows opposite, and it will cause a lot of aggravation in the mornings or whenever everybody backing out at the same time, which we already have. Numbers 9, 10, 11 and 11B all have exits to Manor Road at the same places. There's exhaust fumes going right by the bedroom, the main bedroom
I'm
windows.
going to have to ask you to wind up. Can you finish off, please?
Yeah. Even at the experiencing the effect of the community spirit, where the hostile neighbours in that area will be against the development.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions to the speakers? Yeah, and can we confirm your names? I've got down you as Mr. Munger, Mr. Farrelly, and Mr. Edwards. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Questions for the speakers? No. Thank you very much. If you can return to the other seats, and if we could have Mr. Scanelli to the speaker's chair. Mr. Scanelli, you have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'll probably not need the allocated 4 minutes, primarily because I think the case officer's report explains the reasons why this should go ahead far better than I can sat here. I believe that I've read the report and it doesn't leave any reported concern unaddressed. So that's pretty conclusive in that respect. So with that being the case, I just want to use this opportunity basically to touch on the reasons for the scheme, the benefits, and put it into some context. That context is really, this is a home which I inherited from my late father. I lived in the village for 40 years. I'm not a greedy developer. This is something which, you know, I'm going to develop my family home. The property is, as you see from the images, showing signs of age. I think the last time it was developed was in the late 70s. And at that time, when I was young, it had to be done in quite a resourceful manner because I'm one of 7 children and money wasn't around that much. So it was done on a resourceful budget and with the demands on specification, which were far less than what they are now. So that being said, the house, you saw images of it. The wiring is old, it's got old fuse boards, the plumbing's very noisy, it's the old gravity fed system, windows need replacing, the structure is drafty and poorly insulated, the general layout doesn't make the best use of the space, and the garden is large, as you see, and it is, even for me, a fit guy, a heck of a lot of work to keep up and maintained. So they're the reasons for the development. The benefits it will bring, it would be a chance to build some good quality homes which will exceed modern day expectations. A build where quality of workmanship and materials and specification will provide a good platform, to build a sustainable houses, make the best use of the land, provide additional opportunity for someone else to live in what is a nice village. And I think the scheme fits well with its surrounding areas. Because I've lived in the village for a long time, I kind of knew the styles which would meet that criteria. I embarked on a pre-application process which pared it back, considerably. Then it went through amendments through this application which pared it back again. And I believe it's landed at a place now where it's more than in keeping with its surroundings. And yes, I don't know if it's the right time, but some of the comments which went before me are factually incorrect.
You have 1 minute remaining.
So the fence is the height. There's no intention to lift the land height. The fence is at its height at the back, primarily because the houses at the back of the property, the land is higher. The gravel board isn't 200 and 250 mil, it's your standard 150 mil, and the fence is at that purely because if it wasn't, the soil higher on the other side would be up against the timber part of the fence. I can go on, but it's quite frustrating to hear the comments which aren't factually correct, and I hope that they don't mislead you when you're assessing this application. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Turn your microphone off. Questions for the speaker? Councillor Howard Sorrell, followed by Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I was hoping you could just briefly clarify the distance from 12A, roughly the front of that house, to the rear of 10A, I think it is, the one next door. There's some measurements on here, but they're segmented, so I can't see the exact distances. It looks like it's about 50 metres.
So from 12A to...
Can we use the microphones, please?
From 12A to 10A. It would be, I would say it's about 30 or 40 metres, yeah. The whole plot is, I believe, 80 metres. So it gives you an idea of the scale.
Can I just follow up on that? Yeah, I was only asking because from the plans in front of us, the only overlooking that I can really see would be from 12A into 10A. I can't see any other angles in which either property would cause any sort of overlooking to any other property. So yeah, if it's 40 metres, that's quite a distance. That's not exactly an invasion of privacy. So that was why I was trying to get that clarity.
Yeah, correct. I think, and the report from the case officer touches on that.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask, did you consult the neighbours? If you did consult the neighbours, were you aware of their concern about the driveway? And bearing in mind your choice of design in terms of bringing the proposal as is, did you consider putting the driveway on the other side where it currently has the access and moving the property over as was spoken about in the objector's comments? And what was the reason for you then, if you did consider that, rejecting it and going with the design in front of us?
Yeah, okay. So I consulted with the parish council, so they knew about the scheme well in advance of me going into planning. In regards to whether I considered going on the other side of the plot, I didn't, because I was considering everything, and all things considered, I felt light and space between the two properties of 12 and 10A would be the more beneficial sort of part of the design. Moving it over to the other side is only going to share the impact on 16A, which is the large house to the left of 12A. So it's only going to move the problem towards him and make it probably worse. So when you consider both of them factors and the geographics of the plot, you can see that the existing building is on pretty much a similar footprint as 12A. So it didn't make any sense to move it over to the other side.
Any more questions? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. And just the fence line between the tarmacked area, the drive, okay, and 10A. Can you tell me what sort of fencing you are looking at there? Is it going to be acoustic fencing to try and mitigate any noise into 10A?
Currently, it's the standard timber fencing, but I would be happy to consider an acoustic version of that if it helps the neighbours. I've tried to keep. I mean, the other comment about the hedge line. I mean, it's only drawn like that because the existing hedge on the right-hand side of the plot. I don't know if you can see an image of it. It is an existing hedge, and it's only shown drawn over the boundary because that's how much it has actually grown over into my plot.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I see no more hands up, so thank you very much. If you can have a wipe down, as you already are doing. Next speaker, Councillor Trustin Robinson. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, members, for your time this evening. I'm speaking on behalf of local residents in objecting to this application. The current 12 Manor Road property and neighbouring 10 and 10A are single-storey bungalows. The proposed new dwellings for 12 and 12A are proposed at 2-storey on land around a metre higher than the existing homes at 10 and 10A. The proposed heights of the new buildings are at 6.1 metres and 5.75 metres, and they will be oppressive and out of keeping with the built form which is there existing. It will be a detriment to the nearby residential amenity, privacy, and potentially contribute to loss of light. The existing property at 12A, which you can just see on the screen, is 5.75 metres, but the new plans are between 1/2 and 3/4 of a metre higher at 6.4 metres, and then for the building at the back 12A it's 6.1 metre. I would ask members to carefully consider the impact of a building 1/2 metre to 3/4 of a metre higher than what is there existing, bearing in mind the landfall on the hill of Manor Road, which is around 1 metre between the properties as it is. As a result, this is an inappropriate development which is overbearing and would result in loss of residential amenity. There is a precedence for refusing applications of this type. 10B Manor Road was originally refused as a 2-storey building for these reasons. The applicant talked at length about how the existing home is unsuitable and in need of modernisation. I do not necessarily disagree with that. However, that does not mean that 2 inappropriate 2-storey buildings on this plot are suitable at this time. For those reasons, the application should be refused. Thank you, committee.
Thank you. Questions for Councillor Robinson? No? Thank you very much. Questions to officers? Councillor Ganesh.
Thank you, Chair. My question was around the justification around moving the existing driveway to the other side, which why that wasn't considered as the preferred or the best choice.
I'm afraid we are considering the application that is before us and that position. So obviously that position has been discussed, and you'll be aware from your agenda that there is no objection in highway terms as to the positioning of that access. It is simply the scheme that we have before us for consideration this evening.
Thank you, Chair.
Any more questions for the officers? No? In that case, debate. Greg.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've had some discussion about levels in respect to the application. We do have on page 151 a cross-section across the front of the site that does show the relationship between the existing chalet-style bungalow to the south and then the existing bungalow to the north. But it's really just to request, really, as officers, there's an additional condition added to the list of conditions you have before us. Whilst we've got that levels indication through the street scene drawing, there aren't any datum points on that. So for reasons of precision, I'd like to request that we impose an additional condition requiring the levels details of existing and proposed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Greg. Debate. Councillor Freeman.
When I went to see the site and just having a quick flick through the paperwork, in my head bungalows means a single storey building, which I would have thought was entirely appropriate, even though the driveway, I don't see why that is necessary to move it across to the other side of the garden where it will undoubtedly affect the existing residents. I say, to discover it's a two-storey building, it doesn't seem in keeping with all the other bungalows around. And, you know, I really don't think it's sympathetic to the area. If it was what I saw as a bungalow, the same sort of building we've already got there, but at the back it wouldn't be a problem. And with the access there, I just don't think this is suitable for the area.
Thank you. Anyone else for debate? Okay. I've looked at it with Councillor Freeman, and strangely enough, I came to exactly the opposite conclusion. If you move the drive to the other side, you will also need to move the garage to the other side, which means you will then have a 6.5 metre high building right on the boundary on ground which one person said it's 1 metre higher, one person said it's 2 metres higher, so we'll settle for 1.5 metres. So the gentleman and the couple in 10A will look out their bedroom window, which we did look at, is at the side of the house. They will be looking at something like 7.5 to 8 metre high brick wall, which will block light, and that would be a huge loss of amenity. So having the drive on that side and the single storey garage on that side, I think is the right way to go. There's also along there, I noticed, a 2 metre high close bordered fence. So light from vehicles is going to be contained within the site. It won't be shining into the bedroom windows. And the vehicles that are going to be passing that bedroom are only going to one house. We're not looking at a huge amount of vehicles. I can't see any reason in planning terms to refuse this. I appreciate that people buy a house thinking and hoping that nothing around them will change, and we all do that, but in planning terms I think this is a totally acceptable planning application, so I've no alternative but to move the officer recommendation. Councillor Howard Sorrell.
I'm happy to second your movement for approval. My only concern was the overlooking, and from the plans that we have in front of us, I just don't think that's a large enough concern, like you said, for us to find a reason to refuse it. So, yes, I'm happy to second.
Thank you. Councillor Frost, followed by Councillor Ganesh.
Thank you, Chair. As I alluded to earlier, with questions to the the applicant. I can understand the residents of 10A being concerned about noise, and we obviously have the applicant being prepared to consider an acoustic fence, which would obviously help any potential noise into 10A. And I would like, if possible, to put that condition in, okay, that there is an acoustic fence, and then I'll be happy to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Frost. Councillor Ganesh.
Thank you, Chair. As much as I like to support this application, the concern I have is one around the height of the proposed property and the recommendation to have an acoustic fence that probably may not keep in with the rest of the fence along the road. And it was clearly mentioned that the houses along the road were bungalows, and this is going to be a two-story building in a 70 to 80 centimeters higher than 10A. That probably may not be an appropriate at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no more hands. Councillor Howard Sorrell.
Just to slightly allay maybe some concerns around the noise, the current layout of 10A, from what I can see on the plans at least, is that there are windows at the front of the house. Now, windows are the most likely spot for sound to leak into a building, and the front of the house is maybe 5 metres from the road currently. The new proposed track going down the side will be about 2 or 3 metres from the side of the house, which, again, based on the plans, I think is only brick. So, oh, is it windows as well? Yeah. Okay, well, in that case, I have no point.
Thank you, Councillor Howard Sorrell.
Only that, it's only a couple of metres closer, which won't make a huge difference between the existing noise from the road, which is a main road where cars travel a lot faster, versus slowly down a small tracks.
Thank you, Councillor Howard Sorrell. What that has proved is you really need to come on the viewing panels. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'll make that 9. 1, 2, 3, 4. 9. And those against? 2. That's been approved with the condition of an acoustic fence. Thank you, Catherine.
As just to repeat, that application has been moved for approval, subject to the conditions within your agenda, with reference also to the acoustic fence and a levels condition. Thank you.
Thank you. Here we go. Item 5, Brookside, Grange, Bramley Road, Silchester. If we could have Mrs. Downey and Mr. Harrison to the speakers table. Thank you. Gemma, if you'd like to introduce the case.
Thank you, Chair. Item 5 seeks planning permission for the erection of a single lifetime home with bin store and cycle shed at Brookside, Grange, Bramley Road in Silchester. By way of update, the update paper just summarises the member site visit that was carried out last Friday, and there is no other update. The application is before you today at the request of Councillor Tomlin for the reasons set out on page 154 of the main agenda, and the application is recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Gemma. Speakers, you have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Chairman, Members, thank you for taking the time to listen to us today. I'm not getting younger, and this lifetime home has been designed to fully future-proof in line with the special building regulations that accord with the necessary needs of a disabled person, and in order to ensure that I do not become a burden on the care system. The site is located within the village of Silchester and is an integral part of the linear Three Ashes settlement. There is built form within a matter of metres, and due to the topography, it is completely visually shielded and self-contained. Bramley is very easily and safely accessible by cycle along National Cycle Route 23 and by walking around 1 kilometre along the public footpaths and into the village where there are doctors, trains, buses, shops, post office, pubs, church, school, eateries, etc., all easily accessible by sustainable transport. The house has been designed as a modest single-storey wooden barn to fit in sympathetically with other properties in the area, and I would plan to keep everything in the setting as rurally sympathetic as possible. Most importantly, it's proposed that the dwelling will be carbon neutral, and the aim is to be off-grid in the future. There'll be a water well, ground and air source heating, solar energy, electric car charging, Clargester, etc. In order to ensure that there is a biodiversity net gain, I would plant a new wildflower meadow, new trees and hedgerows. Overall, I believe that this lifetime home would substantially benefit the environment and landscape and reduce my carbon footprint, while also releasing a family home into the local housing mix, which in turn will contribute to the economic and social objective as set out in NPPF paragraph 8 referring to sustainability.
Thank you, Lee. Many members were able to join the site visit held on Friday. For those of you that weren't able to, I hope the video we sent around was very informative. I hope therefore that you will agree that the site does have existing access. There is no creation of access. The residential characteristics of a dwelling will not be as visible to walkers from the footpath to the south, nor from the road that leads to the local settlement of Bramley. It is not a designated landscape area. The site cannot therefore be described as harmful to the landscape character or the visual amenity of it. Bramley, interestingly, is only 1 kilometre away and therefore falls just into the criteria of being within a 1 kilometre distance of a settlement boundary, so as not to be deemed isolated as defined by this council's local plan. Notwithstanding the fact that this new dwelling will be wholly sustainable, the council are unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and therefore local plan policies SS1 and SS6 are out of date. Chairman, members, the harm has to outweigh the benefit. There is already a balance in favour of the development before any consideration is taken into account. As the NPPF clearly states, where the relevant policies in the
You have 1 minute.
are out of date, permission will be granted unless the harm significantly and demonstrably outweighs the benefit. Therefore, there is a presumption in favour before the harm can be considered and a tilted balance in favour of the application. This is, of course, in accordance with the National Planning Policy Framework from which this borough's local plan is derived. The dwelling has been carefully considered, so it will sit comfortably within the landscape. The wet dwelling has been designed to be as energy efficient as possible, and that's hopefully going to be taking it off-grid. May I remind this committee that you approved a similar application back in September for a dwelling at Folly Farm in North Waltham that was similarly recommended for refusal due to landscape concerns. This committee unanimously overturned the officer's recommendation. I would therefore urge you, ladies and gentlemen, to take a similar stance on this and overturn the officer's recommendation by approving this application. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Questions to the speakers? No? Okay, thank you. There are no other speakers, so questions to officers, and if I could start it off. Greg, could you explain to us, in planning law, is there any difference between a lifetime home and any other new dwelling?
Our own local plan policies do refer to a requirement for new development to have 15% of homes as accessible and adaptable. This proposal is only for one dwelling, so there's no requirement for this development to be a lifetime home as such. Nevertheless, that is what is proposed and what is before us. It's not a requirement, but it is a very minor material benefit to the application.
Thank you. Any more questions to the officers? In that case, debate. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. I'll open the debate. Obviously, I brought this to members' attention. For those who went on the site visit, obviously I think that was beneficial to see as we drove through Bramley Lane from Silchester, we could see the pattern of development, and you can see on the location plan we were able as members to see the housing, the farms and the businesses that are all associated along that lane. I think we were able to look at whereabouts it sat in its context with the countryside. It was in the bottom of a field. It was sort of in a depression, if you like, of the field. We saw where the access or an existing access was, and that most of that was just going to be an access route as opposed to being any development, and the development was going to be in the field. Yeah, it's interesting. Silchester, I mean, Silchester does not have a settlement policy boundary, so any new houses in Silchester are all of a similar, I guess they're regarded, correct me if I'm wrong, but regarded as new homes in the countryside because there is no settlement policy boundary. So I just hope that certainly from going on that visit and walking around with members, I certainly was then of the conclusion that this is not sufficiently isolated to warrant it as a reason for refusal. I think that was fairly evident, but that's obviously an opinion. I think it actually would blend in with the landscape, and it certainly wouldn't hurt the biodiversity from the plans that we are understanding. And I know it's not a planning requirement, but as a carbon zero home, we obviously could do with more of that in the borough, and the intent from developers to actually say they're going to do it. I know it doesn't mean they will do it, but there's a strong intent. So we can debate it, and I'm quite happy to place the motion for acceptance. If anybody would like to carry on the debate, I'll move that as a motion. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Frost.
I think it's been very ably put by Councillor Tomlin, and I'll happily second his motion.
Anyone else for debate on this? Okay, I have some concerns about it. There have been several applications in this area for similar things. Strangely, some have gone through and some haven't. Probably my biggest concern is that it's described as a lifetime home, and I'm concerned that how anybody who in later life is not able to drive is going to access any public facilities whatsoever. There's no bus, there's no facilities within a short walking distance. We heard from the applicant that it's a kilometre into Bramley, and I would probably agree with that. So I am concerned about it. However, it has been moved and seconded for approval. So those in favour?
Chair, just before we take the vote, I just wondered, if we could possibly just suggest some conditions in the event that the vote is for the approval of the application.
Please do, Greg.
Thank you.
Thank you. So to start off, just the standard condition requiring development is carried out in accordance with the submitted plans. The next condition securing that the development is carried out within the standard 3 years, securing details of materials, securing details of soft landscaping and hard landscaping along with boundary treatments. It's also suggested by officers that a condition is imposed to remove permitted development rights to prevent over urbanisation of the site, securing the provision and retention of the proposed parking spaces along with the proposed cycle storage and bin storage. the submission of a tree protection plan, which, as set out within the report, is suggested that could be covered by a pre-commencement condition. Secure the submission of a construction environmental management plan and a habitat creation, enhancement and management scheme plan in relation to the biodiversity net gain that's been demonstrated. Again, suggested that both those conditions are pre-commencement. A condition to secure a bat-sensitive lighting scheme in the interest of biodiversity. And a further condition to secure the submission of a construction method statement in relation to water efficiency in accordance with policy EM9. Followed by standard construction hours condition and delivery hours condition, and then lastly a condition to secure submission of details of finished floor levels prior to commencement of development as well. As some of those conditions listed are pre-commencement, I would suggest to councillors that the motion is for approval with the delegation to the planning and development manager for those pre-commencement conditions to be agreed with the applicant prior to the decision being issued.
Thank you, Gemma. Been moved and seconded for approval with the conditions as outlined by Gemma. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I make it. And those against? Just me. And 1 abstention. Thank you. Gemma.
Thank you. Just to confirm, the application has been approved, subject to confirmation from the applicant that they're in agreement with the pre-commencement conditions, and that's subject to the conditions that I've just listed. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 6, 309 Kempshot Lane, Basingstoke, and if we could have Mr. Mark Vickers and Miss J. Vickers to the Speaker's chair. No. Doesn't look like we have them. Okay, if they're not here, they're not here. In that case, Mr. Brian Richardson to the Speaker's chair. Evening, Mr. Richardson, you have 4 minutes, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining, button on the microphone.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, thank you for hearing me.
Sorry, my mistake. Please introduce the case.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an application for land at 309 Kempshot Lane. The proposal is for the erection of a prefabricated timber building to be used as a staff respite room. The building would be positioned in the rear of the plot next to the rear boundary of the site. There's no update to provide members, and the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions located at the end of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. You have 4 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, thank you for hearing me this evening. In your consideration of this proposal, we would like you to note that we emphasise that this is an essential facility and service, one that is necessary along with other healthcare services to sustain and enhance the vitality and viability of our community. We are responding to the welfare needs of our patients and staff due to the pandemic and ongoing pandemic conditions. The proposed respite room needs to be in place to ensure the safety of our patients and to support our healthcare staff now and in the future. To put this modest proposal in context, the small building is no different than if one of our residential neighbours erecting a similar shed in their garden under permitted development. The use of our building is subject to conditions and the prescribed times of opening. The neighbours have no such restrictions, and if they decided to have an auxiliary summer house and use it at varying times and late into the evening, that would of course be allowed and arguably more intrusive to the residential context by way of light and noise than our proposal might be. This is a temporary structure by its nature. There are no trench foundations required, only a concrete slab. It is an assembly of a prefabricated parts, again no different from any other shed structure a neighbour might be able to erect under permitted development. Your officers have made a recommendation for approval and have set out clear reasons for that approval. The recommendation says, it is considered that the principle of the proposed development meets the criteria set out within the above policies in the local plan and is therefore acceptable subject to other material planning considerations being considered. The proposed development would be of an acceptable design and would not adversely impact the character and appearance of the surrounding area, and as such complies with the National Planning Policy Framework, Policy EM10, of the Basingstoke and Deane Local Plan and guidance contained within the Design and Sustainability Supplementary Planning document. The development would not result in undue loss of privacy or cause undue overlooking, overshadowing, overbearing or noise disturbance impacts to neighbouring properties, and as such complies with the authority's policies. The development would not cause an adverse impact on highway safety, as it is considered there is appropriate parking being provided to serve the development. As such, the proposal would comply with the appropriate policies. The proposed development would not cause any adverse impacts on biodiversity, and as such, the proposal is considered to be in accordance with policy. The recommendation also addresses in detail the objections from neighbours.
You have 1 minute.
I will not readdress these points here, as it has been well covered in the report. We commend the recommendation for approval to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions to the speaker? Yeah, okay, I have one. Where is your existing staff sort of breakout area? And once that's been released, what will that space be used for in the future?
Currently, the staff room doubles as one of the office spaces within the property due to the expansion of the property, which was approved by this committee. That office is usable. However, it is when we return to pre-pandemic guidelines for the NHS, we are running a full day, whereas at the moment they're allowing us to break for an hour for lunch to get that respite. When we return to our NHS contractual timings, we have to run all the way through the day, so that office will be in use at all times.
Thank you. Councillor
When you say all day, what sort of operating hours does your practice have?
Our current opening hours are from 9 AM until 5:30 PM on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday and Friday. On a Wednesday we open until 6:30 and on a Saturday we open from 9 until 1:30. Our current criteria do allow us to open until 8 o'clock each evening though.
When things returned to sort of pre-COVID, were you planning to use your up to 8 PM sort of opening times, or will you still be sort of maintaining an earlier opening hours?
I think my wife, who's the clinician, would kill me if we went to 8 o'clock every night. So no, we wouldn't be planning on moving our opening hours to 8 o'clock each night.
Councillor Ganesh.
Thank you, Chair. So what was the provision pre-COVID situation, and why are you looking for a sort of a temporary solution rather than trying to seek for something permanent?
Pre-COVID, as COVID hit, our contract changed. We increased our contract by 3 times. Which is why the original application to extend the property itself and add another surgery was put forward and approved, and we've completed those works now. The ability to extend the current building further, we thought, was too much of an impact on our neighbours. to put a permanent structure there, whereby a cabin which would be in keeping with a residential garden and not imposing on the neighbours as much as more hard building going on was a better option for us.
Okay. Any more questions for the speaker? Chair, your mic's still on. Thank you. Thank you very much. No more speakers, so questions to officers. Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, obviously we have this application in front of us, but would they be able to put this up, this cabin up through permitted development rights?
Within permitted development rights, if they were over 2 metres from the boundary, they could erect a structure that was up to 4 metres in height. Just because they're within 1 metre of the boundary, it's just pushing over the 2.5 metre height that they can do under permitted development. It's proposing 3.2, so it's 0.7 over what someone could do under permitted development. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. So just to clarify, the only reason why they've gone for, they've had to make a planning application. Sorry.
Right, to confirm, that's only if it was a householder, yeah. Thank you. So it's because it's a commercial premises, they can't do that under permitted development. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. Thank you.
Thank you, I was just coming on to that. Thank you, Chair.
Any more questions for the officers? No? Debate? Thank you.
I'd like to move the recommendation.
Councillor Ganesh. Moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? Yeah, it's everyone. Right. Officer, if you could
thank you.
confirm.
Just to confirm that that's approved in line with the officer's recommendation. Thank you. With the conditions listed at the end of the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're right on time, aren't we? Item number 7, 20 Plantation Road, Tadley. And if we could have Miss Amanda Davis and Mrs. Linda Stevenson to the speakers' chairs. If you could just wait there for a few minutes whilst the officer introduces the case.
Thank you, Chair. Item 7 seeks planning permission for the erection of a single-storey rear extension following the demolition of an existing conservatory at 20 Plantation Road in Tadley. There is no update and the application is before you this evening due to the number of objections received and the officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could confirm your name and then you have 4 minutes and I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Mrs. Davies. Mrs. Stevenson couldn't make it today. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to express our points. While we completely understand these are not all material planning considerations and you can only consider applications set out to you, I want to use these 4 minutes to try and stress our concerns from knowledge we have about the applicants and their previous applications for other properties. The applicant already has a couple of properties away from this one, as well as a number of properties in the Tadley area, all of which have been turned into small HMOs. A drastic analogy, I know, but relevant and sometimes things need to be hard-hitting. A person with a prior conviction is walking around the streets with a weapon. You wouldn't wait to see what they will do with it. You act immediately before they can cause any harm. This is the same here. We know the applicant has form for what they do with their properties, so why can we allow them to be approved with this application, know what they would do with it in the end? Why do we not have Article 4 in Tadley? Oh, sorry, where have I gone? You state in your report that the matter is for planning policy, so what do we need to do to get this addressed with some urgency? You've already spoken this evening about the importance of family homes and also homes for young people. This 4-bed property is mainly geared towards second-time buyers, but allowing them the chance to purchase homes like this will then free up the smaller properties for younger people to those with small or young families. This application has stopped one family making this move. This applicant has stopped several families in Tadley making this move. How many more properties are in Tadley like this? Less families in the area, less children in schools, another school to close or be merged, as has happened with one of the infant schools and a recent preschool. While we appreciate this application isn't about house purchases, we want to just show the full extent this one applicant is having within our area. We haven't looked into the others that are probably doing the same. We would very much like to welcome this application to be utilised as the 4-bed family home with a lovely garden that it was intended, with children who would use the local preschools and schools, in turn keeping local people in local jobs. This may also be a local family staying close to other family, not something that is easy to do in Tadley anymore with rising prices. By approving this application, we can then condemning this property to then become a child and family-free property for single people, as they have already done to a number of their properties. In respect of the planning itself, I'd like to question the conservatory. Not many, if any, conservatories that we have seen have this much brickwork. It is an applicant with a clever architect who knows exactly how they can push the limits of regulations. This is the exact same conservatory plan that has been added or tried to be in some of their other properties, and in each case neighbours have made objections and addressed issues with the HMO. Ingenious that this time they've added the conservatory to their original plans. The plans that have been submitted show a playroom, extending living room and dining space on the ground floor. However, we know this is almost the exact same layout used on 26 Plantation Road that was previously granted. Those downstairs layouts have now become 2 bedrooms, each with living and ensuite facilities. 2 houses in one street of 18 properties. Imagine if that percentage ran through the whole of the borough. We just ask that the applicant is set with this application is set with conditions that the plans have to be followed.
You have
as
1
approved.
minute.
That's me, sorry.
Thank you. If you could turn your microphone off, thank you. Questions for the speaker? I have none. Councillor Leeks.
Good evening. I'm just wondering, there's one objection letter from somebody who said to near school would be dangerous, increasing traffic near. Which school is he talking, or he or she talking about? Do you know?
I would expect that would probably be the Hurst School or possibly Burnham Copse, which might be the other way, but they have a lot of families that walk along that route, going from either Borghurst to Burnham Copse or from the Tadley route out to the Hurst.
Thank you. No more questions? No. Thank you very much. And we have no more speakers, so questions to officers. Councillor Harvey.
Can I just clarify the applicant so I've got it clear in my head? Is it the resident of the property, or is it the owner of the property in terms of being a property company, given the officer's comment, the reference on the right front in the table on the front of the application? Just want to clarify what we're dealing with.
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that question. It's just what's populated from our system. I'd need to have a look at the application form itself to find out more information, but I don't have that to hand.
Thank you. So just for clarity, I'm saying the applicant on the front is Ish Estate Limited.
Thank you. Any more questions for the officers? No? In that case, debate. Councillor Harvey.
Just looking at the application and on the basis of the report, there doesn't seem a reason for a rejection. However, looking at the proposed floor plan on 201, I guess my concern becomes the subservience of the extension to the property itself. And I'm just looking at the scale of the footprint of the extension to the scale of the existing property. And it is a massive extension in terms of footprint. And I'm just weighing that up in my mind as to the context of that and the importance of that set against the arguments that are in the report. So I'm thinking about the footage, the square footage of that extension as compared to the existing, and then saying in my head, okay, then is it subservient to the main property?
Anyone else for debate? Councillor Leeks.
I seek a legal advice. I've just realised that the town council owns the curb other side strip of land between the Plantation Road and the A340. So would you like me to leave?
It's the town council that owns it, not you personally. Yes, but you still don't own it yourself personally.
Thank you for the clarification. Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. There is, quite an issue here with a lot of of houses have entirely been, switched to HMOs. I know that we can't use Article 4 restricting conversions to dwellings to small HMOs because that's a planning policy and not a material planning consideration for this application. But I do have concerns that what will happen is an HMO, will be developed in this. But I have no planning reason to actually reject this. So therefore, I will be abstaining, just as a point of reference.
Thank you, Councillor Frost. Councillor Harvey.
Just to put it on record, I'm concerned that we don't have the applicant in front of us. I'm concerned that we have statements regarding a HMO that we can't reference beyond what's in the report. And so we can't determine actually who is asking for the application, the context in which this is then set. So I realise it's not a reason for rejection, but I do think it's a reason to say actually it's an incredibly poor application that we don't have the applicant here to know actually what we're dealing with. And so you have that Ish Estates Limited. And for all I know, this property is rented. For all I know, that is exactly what they intend to do, is to turn it into a HMO. And for all I know, while it's not a planning reason, we have somebody here who is potentially using the system. And that is a concern in the context that we can't question or change or address that. So I just want to put that on the record, the concern I have regarding that.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. I don't see any other hands up. There's 2 points that have come up to me. One was a point that Councillor Harvey raised over the size of the footprint. I think we need to bear in mind that part of that footprint that is shown in the plan is already covered by an existing conservatory. So actually the extension probably isn't quite as big as it looks on the plan. But the other thing, it all comes down to what we're talking about, this HMO, and I'm looking at page 193 and the public observations. The applicant is the same to other properties. We can't consider that. The applicant makes properties into HMOs. That is not the application that's in front of us. We can't consider it. Concerns about the ability for HMOs to be evacuated. It's not an application for an HMO. If they come back at a later date to turn this into an HMO, that is a separate application. So whilst we might think and might like to refuse it because it might be an HMO, planning law will not support us in that case. Nobody else feels inclined to, so I will move the officer recommendation for approval. Is there a seconder? That drops us right in it, doesn't it? And what happens? I've moved it. We don't have a seconder.
Chair, that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Godison. It's been moved and approved, moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? 3. Those against? 3. Okay, that makes it 3-all. Sorry, is that? Can I have hands up against, please? That's 3. No, sorry, it's you're a bit late. In which case, that makes it 3-all. So I have a casting vote. So I will cast in favour. That motion, that application is approved. Officer, could you confirm the recommendation, please?
Thank you, Chair. That's just to confirm that the application is approved, subject to the conditions as set out at the end of the report, and as set out in the main agenda. Thank you.
We're right on time, aren't we? Item number 8. Land adjacent to Gore End Road, Ball Hill. There are no speakers. So, Catherine, if you could introduce it, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As indicated, this is a site for land adjacent to Gore End Road, Ball Hill in Hampshire. The application is seeking permission in principle for the residential development for a minimum of 1 unit and a maximum of 4 dwellings. And this is our site as illustrated on page 225 of your agenda. The only issues we are considering are the location, the land use and the amount of development. The application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions listed within the report. Thank you.
So, questions to officers? No. Debate? No. In which case I can... Sorry, Councillor Ganesh, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So we've had the opportunity to view the property view the site last Friday. My only concern was the tree right in the corner where the entrance is, but it's not proposed to be removed. So I'm in the favour of approving it.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
So my only concern was the tree right in the corner, which was in sort of a, we were in a doubt whether it was removed or not, but according to plan, it's not. So I'm in favour of approving it.
Okay.
Sorry, excuse me, just a point of order, please, Chair.
Councillor Frost.
Can we just move on to the relevant things, because that is the previous application. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you. As you quite rightly say, Councillor Ganesh, the tree is retained. The new entrance to the site is much further down, so the tree is not affected. Did you move that for approval, Councillor Ganesh?
Yes, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Freeman.
I'd say it's pretty sound, but the only concern I'd have is that bend that goes round the blind bend. I believe Councillor Faulkner mentioned it. It'd certainly be something probably down to highways, but I don't see there's any reason to refuse the application. It's just a slight concern that that's a bit of a blind bend, and access and sight lines would probably need to be improved before anything was built on there.
Thank you for that. Sorry, Greg.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, really, in respect of the tree, this is an application for permission in principle. So at the current time, the details of the layout aren't before us, but the intention is noted moving forward.
Okay. We have a proposer. I don't think you seconded it, did you, Councillor?
I didn't, but I can.
If you would.
Happy to second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? Yeah, that's all of them. Thank you. If you can confirm the recommendation.
Thank you, Chairman. That application has been approved, subject to the details contained within your agenda. Thank you.
Item 6, if we could introduce it.
Thank you, Chairman. So item 6 before you is an additional paper for your consideration in the absence of delegated powers for the discharge of a Section 52 legal agreement. So the agreement that we are considering actually ties a property known as 7A Newbury Street to associated land in perpetuity, and also prevents this dwelling from being disposed of separately from the wider land, including 5 and 7 Newbury Street. This agreement actually no longer serves a planning purpose as set out within the report, particularly on page 233 of the agenda. So this is before you this evening, and the recommendation is that the application to discharge the legal agreement in its entirety be approved, subject to the completion of the details before you. Thank you.
Okay. Right, we have Lisa Jackson in support. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thanks very much, Chairman and members. I'm the planning agent. My name is Lisa Jackson.
As Catherine has set out, this is not a formal planning application, and it's only before you because the officers don't have the delegated powers to remove legal agreements in their entirety. The legal agreement was imposed upon the dwelling in 1983, some 38 years ago, and the agreement is so old it was constructed under legislation that now no longer applies. However, in order to remove the legal agreement, it is necessary to formally apply for that to the council, and this request has been made on the fact that the purpose for which the agreement was originally secured no longer applies. The dwelling was permitted in 1983, and that was on the basis that it allowed modern on-site accommodation for the pharmacist. This was my client's mother, who is now deceased, and at that time she had been the town's pharmacist for many years. The purpose was to maintain an out-of-hours pharmacy service in the town. When she retired in 1989, the pharmacist let the pharmacy to a third party and then had no involvement in providing pharmacy services for the town from that point. My client's parents continued to live in the dwelling in breach of that legal agreement. Following the death of my client's father in 2002, the dwelling has been occupied by tenants. None of these tenants have had any involvement with the pharmacy at any stage. Planning policy has changed considerably in the last 38 years. Policy restrictions that applied at that time are no longer relevant, and national policy in the National Planning Framework has made a specific challenge to make more effective use of land, particularly space above shops, even when there is some reduction in amenity. The existing dwelling has an acceptable level of parking for 2 cars and cycle parking when considered against current standards. Whilst there is no parking in 5 and 7 Newbury Street, the tea shop and the pharmacy, that's really not unusual in town centres. It is no longer appropriate to tie the occupation of the dwelling to the pharmacy at Whitchurch. The pharmacy is let to a chain of 1,650 pharmacies across the country who draw their staff from a wide range of locations, and with modern practice it is no longer necessary for the pharmacist to live on site. The drafting of the legal agreement was also highly problematic, but however, given the legal agreement is accepted as no longer required by the officer, as set out in the report and suggested today, they have not considered the problematic legal drafting. As there are no technical impacts or harms from the development, it is considered that the change proposed would constitute sustainable development, and therefore I request on behalf of my clients that the legal agreement restricting occupation should now be removed in its entirety, and I'm very happy to answer any specific questions you have on this item.
Thank you very much. Questions for the speaker? No. Thank you very much. Questions to officers? No. Debate. Councillor Frost, followed by Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say, I think this paper was one of the clearest papers I've kind of read. Okay, and I thank officers for that because coming at the end of quite a weighty tomb of applications, it was most welcome. If the legal agreement, okay, tied to 7A Newbury Street is no longer required, I think that we should go with the officer's agreement. It's been through legal, okay, and therefore I will be happy to move it right now, okay, as long as we get a seconder. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Frost. Councillor Harvey.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? Yeah, it's everybody. Officer, could you confirm?
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that application has been moved for approval for the discharge of the legal agreement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Just before you go, very, very quickly, I'd just like to pass on some thanks from various people about the conduct of this committee 2 weeks ago at the rather complicated planning application. We've had some really, really good feedback. So thank you very much, everybody. That's it. Good night.